Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Really appreciate it. And we're going to begin this evening by talking to you a little bit about what we all do and how we got where we are today. And then we're going to open it up, obviously, for questions at the end. I'm John Gibraltar. I want to introduce to you the members of the Cabinet. Dr. Susan Henking, Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs. Dr. Carrie Pine, Assistant Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs and Dean of Students. Pam Sheridan, Vice President for Advancement. Hang on to that. Chris LaGreca, Vice President for Marketing and Communications. And at the end, Gerard Turbide, Vice President for Enrollment Services. And would you like to introduce the board? Okay.
So I'm Marie Chapman Carroll, class of 75, go Hawks. And I'm chair of the board. And there's several board members that are in the audience, but here on the stage with me are Lisa Mazzola Kania, class of, I'll get it right, 79, vice chair. And Vicki Keller Penhouse, who's celebrating her 50th this year, class of 74, and she's the board secretary. And then we have Jen Albina, who's class of 78. So, and the board is basically John and the cabinet are management. The board is much more, again, an oversight type role. We work with the cabinet on some of the strategic issues and things like that, fiduciary responsibility, but it's a very separate role from the cabinet, and you're really going to hear first from the cabinet in terms of a lot of what they've been working towards. So,
thank you. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to kind of give you some context. Those of you who have had a long association with Wells know full well that this has been many years of a journey. And as you think back over the decades, the college has taken actions and steps over the years to sustain herself. And I'm just going to tell you about a couple of those things that many of you are aware of. The co-ed decision occurred at a time when the college needed more revenue and more students. People were upset about that decision, but at that time it was a necessary decision. A couple of years later, again, the college borrowed against its endowment $15 million. That endowment repayment is $500,000 a year that occurs every single year and should occur for the next 20 years to fully repay the endowment. The sale of the Inns of Aurora was another step the college took to sustain financial stability at the time. When I arrived on July 6th of 2015, there were many things that we've done over these 9 years. The approval of 8 new academic majors, renovations of properties, the new athletic sports complex allowed us to have women's softball, men's baseball. Men's baseball brought 40 students to Wells. Redoing the Schwartz Athletic Center, Glen Park Bridge, renovation of residence halls, Glen Park, Leach, Dodge, renovations in Maine. All of these things were necessary to be done. Renovations in the dining hall, all necessary to be done so that students would have an interest and be attracted to come to Wells. And 2020 came, and there was a global pandemic. And many of you remember at that time, the governor of the state of New York shut down all businesses in the state. And we had to go fully remote like that. And when we were able to reopen the college, thanks in large part to your support because we asked for your help and you gave it to us. We raised $3.5 million in 6 weeks. That was remarkable. And we didn't even know there was going to be COVID relief funds at that time. But we were able to secure funds through the Payroll Protection Plan, the Employee Retention Credit Plan. We were so proud at that time to be able to make it through the pandemic and sustain all of our employees. The higher education relief funds came our way, and all of those things allowed us to reopen the college in a bigger and better way. And since that time, we have worked hard to rebuild a sense of community here. Campus morale, student life, traditions, all of these things have really started to recover. Retention recovered remarkably under the leadership of Susan and Carrie and all the others in residence and student life. But the bottom line was, through it all, we just didn't have enough students to generate enough revenue. And for those of you that have been keeping track of what's going on in the world today, remember, after the pandemic, America's confidence in higher education tanked, and a lot of young people decided not to go back to college. And remember that over these past couple of years, colleges, especially small colleges in the United States, were literally closing at the rate of one a week. In the last year, 4 colleges closed in the state of New York, including Wells. And the United States Department of Education did not help us in all of this, right? The Congress demanded that the Department of Education make the application for federal financial aid easier. They should have launched the new financial aid forms in November. They launched them in March and April, and 40% of the students that should have been applying to go to school were waiting to hear about what was going to happen with their federal aid. And through all of that, there were a large percentage of reports coming back from the federal government that were just false. And so students were concerned about making a commitment. We could not accurately predict enrollment. And you've heard about, because I told you about, the articulation agreement we had with AMDA College of Performing Arts. We thought this was going to be an incredible opportunity, and it could have been. But in order to get the articulation agreement and the online certification for the BA in theater approved, it had to be approved by the New York State Education Department. And it was. In 3 weeks, it's unheard of for the State Ed Department to respond that quickly. And then it had to go to the Middle States Commission. And Middle States told us they would not act on it until the end of June. Again, we could not reasonably predict transfer enrollment into Wells in the fall through that program, and we came to the inevitable conclusion that we just were not going to have the financial resources to open the college. I am so grateful to all of you who've given over the years to Wells. When I got here, our annual fundraising goal was $2.5 million. You know what it is now? $4.5 million. Do you know what we would need to be sustainable next year? Close to $10 million in annual fund support. And we have asked so many people, and so many have supported us to the degree that they can and to the degree that they could, but nobody was going to step up to give us that kind of money. So here we are. And for the last month, all of us have been receiving a whole range of emotions that I know exist in this room right now. I know people are angry. I know people are sad. I know people are hurting. So are we. We're people. We're human beings. But I want to say something to you, and I want you to hear me. Nobody here is at fault. These are good, hardworking, caring people who gave with their heart and soul. Volunteers and hardworking people who got up every morning and worked 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, to find a path forward for this institution. And you should not blame them for where we are right now. because they care and they're hurting as much as you are. And I see it in their faces every single day when we have conversations. For the last month, we've been focused on trying to help our faculty, staff, and students. And we want to take a few minutes to show you the work that's been done to help them. And when we're done with that, and you get a sense of how hard all of us have worked to help them, then we'll open it up to your questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to whoever is next. Susan.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you must do when a Board of Trustees votes closure, okay? The rules are set by the federal government in their wisdom, the state of New York in its wisdom, and our accrediting agency. There's an umbrella term, teach out, and that has to do with 3 topics. Topic 1 is students, and that is the paramount thing that you have to pay attention to, is your current students. The second set of things you have to pay attention to is the second most important group of people, that would be employees. The third thing you have to pay attention to is money. And I'm terribly sorry to say this, but other people are way down in the pile here. Those of you who have spent time and energy at Wells as students. So under that giant umbrella called the Teach Out, there's a smaller umbrella. And those are the agreements you create to support students. When a college closes, those students become among the most unlikely to finish college. The general percentage of people who finish, who leave a closed institution, is about 42%. It is much higher already for us in terms of people who have enrolled. And the way you accomplish that is by making agreements with other institutions to treat them fairly. And what treating them fairly means is, first and foremost, they have to represent and warrant, yes, I talk to lawyers, they must represent and warrant that they're financially stable. The second thing you want them to do, in order to make an agreement with them, is to hold them at more or less the same price. The same bottom line, folks. It's been confusing for some of us and some of our students because it may be a slightly different arrangement of what you call things, right? Harvard does not have a Henry Wells scholarship, but that doesn't mean they don't give scholarships out. So the nomenclature may be different, but the basic price people should be paying is the same, as though they went to Wells. So our agreements, with one exception I'll talk to you about briefly, say that. We turned down some institutions, so if you're fried because we don't have one with Harvard, we didn't ask them. But some of the places we talked to weren't going to hold our students financially stable. So some people want to transfer to those places, but if they weren't going to guarantee the completion of a degree paying the same as you would pay at Wells, we weren't interested. Now, the slightly different teach-outs are SUNY colleagues, because the organization of their money is different and their cost is different. So those are phrased differently, but they're going to pay the same or less to any of the 24 institutions we've made an agreement with. I'll come back to why 24. The other thing that we asked everybody to do, and everyone agreed to, was to count 100% of the credits that they took at Wells towards their degree from wherever they're coming from. It doesn't mean they're going to count exactly the same way. We may be the only institution I've ever heard of that gives credit for varsity sports. So they're not getting credit for varsity sports at any of these places, but they're getting the credit as toward their 120, okay? Then we also asked for people we have some criteria. They don't have an option. If a student applies and is in good standing, they must accept them. So if Susan Henking, who's not in good academic standing, applies, they can reject me, but they cannot reject our Wellsians who are in good academic standing. Some of our students have applied to multiple places. I can't tell if they don't understand that, or they're hedging their bets, or they can't decide yet. They also have to do a few other things. They have to ensure that our students can complete in a timely way, right? You can't transfer somewhere as a teach-out partner and then takes 6 more years. It has to be completable in the same amount of time. And last but not least, they're not charging application fees. There is some confusion out there in the world between an application fee and a deposit. 100% of our teach-out partners, if there's a deposit, it comes back to them in their first bill. Okay? There's a few double dippers out there because there's a few people running GoFundMe campaigns, but there you go. And these agreements, the reason you want a range of them is, first of all, not all students are alike. There are some geographic rules. You must have some within, it's 300 miles, folks. You must have some within 300 miles. They must be delivered in the same modality you deliver, but we chose to put one online there to give people flexibility. They must have the programs that you're offering. So there are relatively few small liberal arts colleges that do hospitality management, so that affects our number. So we initially started with 7, and then a lot of others ran towards us out of generosity and frankly the desire to have those great students, right? So when you look on our website, it says 24 teach-out institutions. Now for them to be formally approved, that takes a few more steps. The majority of ours have been approved. There's a few dangling out there because they're not from the same accreditor as we are. They will be approved. There's almost never a non-approval. So that's what the teach-out partners are. And our students, because of the way they were feeling at the time, somehow felt they had to decide before they went home. They can decide all the way up to basically the middle of August, because most of these schools start school towards the end of August or into September. So they've got time to make a wise and informed decision, and they have support, which Carrie will talk about later, in getting as much information as possible about these places. Now, I will say, even though it's not on my slide, some people are not going to teach-out institutions. They're choosing other places. We're trying to provide as much support as humanly possible wherever they want to go. One of the people, for example, has transferred from Wills to Columbia University. So that's what a teach-out partner is, and a teach-out agreement, and the general requirement to take care of our people, our students first, our mission first, and then the other things that roll out from that. I'm going to turn it over to Jan.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks to everybody for being here today. So Susan ran through what a teach-out partner is. I'm going to talk a little bit about a legacy partner, which is probably not quite as interesting as the teach-out partner. The teach-out partner, I can't tell you the number of hours that went into getting all the teach-out partners coordinated and have that first group of 7 teach-out partners in hand. So what's a legacy partner? So a legacy partner, we are required by New York State to have a place for our records to go. Not only the transcripts, the student transcripts, but our employment records, our financial records have to be maintained for a period of years. And of course the students, you all care about your transcripts probably, except those who are retired, you probably don't need your transcripts anymore. But people who are seeking employment are concerned about, well, how do I get transcripts with Wells closing? And so that's part of what a legacy partner does for us. It takes care of the transcripts as well as the employment records, because our employees or staff and faculty who are moving on to other places need to be able to confirm their time of employment at Wells. So that's something else a legacy partner will do for us. And we received proposals from a number